Welcome back to Coffee at the Cocoon.
Yes.
Do you want to start with some introductions?
Yes,
Elizabeth?
I do. So I'm Elizabeth. I use she, they pronouns. And I'm drinking water today out of my Know Better, Do Better, Be Better mug by Oh Man through ODBN. And that's because we are talking about Sexual Assault Awareness Month today. But first, I guess, who are you?
Well, once again, my name is Justina, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Education and Outreach Coordinator with the Cocoon. Today, I'm drinking a very fruity lemonade.
So fun.
Breaking the coffee theme already.
Yes, fantastic. And we have a guest.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and who are you?
I am Gabby. I'm the sexual violence advocate, and I am drinking caramel frappuccino.
Nice. Love a good frap.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, like I said, we're talking about Sexual Assault Awareness Month today. That will be the whole month of April, I guess. At the end, we'll talk about some quote unquote, things we're doing this month.
Yeah.
But I guess first we should maybe talk, like, what is sexual violence? Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, as the expert of being our sexual violence advocate, bold words, would you like to talk a little bit about what is sexual violence?
So, I mean, it has a lot. It's a loaded word. But I guess, like, you could categorize it by any unwanted sexual attention, touching, comments, of any kind. So yeah, I mean,
absolutely,
there's a lot.
Yeah,
it really is, and it's kind of like this umbrella term that we use to kind of scoop up all of the different types of sexual violence because there are so many. Of course, we have sexual assault, we have rape, we've got human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking, stalking, sexual harassment, and all of those things that kind of cultivate together to make the umbrella of sexual violence and what that definition is.
Yeah. And something we hadn't quite mentioned yet, because it's our second episode, so we're getting used to this. But because this is what we're talking about today, take care of yourselves. Like, kind of a trigger warning. We're going to be talking about sexual violence, obviously. Hopefully you know that because you signed up for the Cocoon episode. But kind of like what both of you said, it's very much an umbrella term, and I think people define it however they feel comfortable, right? I think a lot of survivors that I've talked to or just know personally struggle to define what sexual violence means to them, so I think keeping it more of a broad spectrum of unwanted attention is the best way to include as many people as possible.
I think something that I've learned in this position is that, like, legality doesn't always mean that it's not included in sexual violence.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something that, like, a lot of people I work with struggle with, is that because it wasn't technically illegal doesn't mean that it wasn't sexual violence, and it doesn't mean that it's not harmful.
Right, because there has to be an acknowledgement that although the court system and the legal justice system that we have is there for a reason, that it isn't always the most survivor friendly, especially in the state of Ohio. But I think across the nation, that's an accurate depiction of that. And I think it's really important to really acknowledge that there are a lot of differences from the legal realm and what we do here in advocacy work when we're supporting survivors of violence. So I really appreciate you bringing that up, and we just have to continue to try to educate and promote change and advocacy in the court systems to better serve survivors too. And using that language that survivors are using, I think, is probably really empowering to their situation because, like you said, Elizabeth, there's not always a clear-cut, cookie-cutter definition for the violence that can be experienced.
And unfortunately, I think society wants there to be a clear-cut definition, which also invalidates a lot of people, And I would also like to point out, I'm sure we'll get into this more with Sexual Assault Awareness Month definitions and things, but, sexual violence isn't just for women either. Like, this is for anybody, like women, children, men, non-binary folks, right? Like,
absolutely.
It's everyone is affected by sexual violence. So I think a lot of times we think of just women being affected by this, and it's really just more than that,
Yeah, and I think that's a really good segue into talking about some like statistics that we hear. Not to bore you all with raw data, but it also is really prevalent in understanding how much this impacts individuals in our not only our community but our nation as a whole. Violence, just like any other, can happen to anyone, regardless of their race, their gender, their socioeconomic status, any of those things. But I think because of the type of violence it is, it's really taboo for some people. So I know that the CDC just came out with some new statistics just earlier this year, saying that now just half of women that are residents in the United States have or will experience sexual violence within their lifetime. But previously, it was what, 1 in 4,
1 in 3, 1 in 4,
1 in 3, 1 in 4. Yeah, so now it's just half of American women will experience violence. And for men, it's 1 in 6
right
now.
And what's hard with that number too, with the 1 in 6 men, is that's 1 in 6 men that have reported.
Correct.
Right? Because I think, something that I am working on constantly in prevention is talking about the stigma around men being sexually assaulted, right? And so many men don't feel like they're allowed to or can speak about it, right?
Absolutely.
So I do feel like that's just, the statistic is pretty skewed, or potentially skewed, and that number has grown quite a bit over the years. And so I do think that men are feeling more comfortable disclosing, but it's very difficult for a lot of people in a lot of different communities.
Absolutely. And regardless of the gender identity that someone has, we're finding out with all of these new studies and data that's being released from the CDC that a good chunk of these acts of sexual violence that people are experiencing are happening before the age of 18.
Yeah.
And most of them are happening before the age of 25.
Right.
And I think that is just mind-blowing.
Yes.
In most cases.
But I also think that speaks to why all three of us really focus on a younger population. All of us are involved with campus activities. I focus on middle and high school ages, right? So I think that's really why we're able to focus on that age group, unfortunately, because they are the age group that's most affected by sexual violence.
Absolutely. And thinking about it, we know that the national statistic right now is that every 68 seconds, an American is exposed to sexual violence.
Yeah.
That's just an American statistic. And also to amplify what you just said a minute ago, is that those are only based on reported incidents. So think about what that is like without, the reported incidents as well as across the globe.
Yeah. I was just talking to my partner about this, and they were blown away when I told them that. They were like, "That's real?" I'm like, "Yeah, no, that's not inflated. That's a real number, every 68 seconds. And that's wild, and it's just wild to think about.
And even thinking about not only it being a taboo topic for men to report, we also don't have a lot of information regarding marginalized communities, like those who are transgender or non-binary. I know that you said you had a statistic about those who have disabilities.
Yeah, so more than 90% of people with intellectual or developmental disabilities have been sexually assaulted at some point in their life.
Wow.
Which is also insane because, I don't think people also recognize a lot of disabilities, but that includes ADHD, dyslexia, autism, which is a spectrum, right?
Yeah. So
these people that are extremely, functional can still be, taken advantage of and manipulated because of the position that they're in.
Right.
So,
and that might make it even that much harder for them to report it as well, because they might not even know, back to the whole definition of sexual violence, they might not even know that it is sexual violence, which might make that even harder.
Yeah, well, not knowing, but also, being a part of that group of people, you're not taken as serious often by organizations and the people that are supposed to be protecting you, or you're told that you don't know what you're talking about, or you're not given the resources to get the help that you need in those positions.
Yeah,
so. Absolutely.
Or you're actively discriminated against in those systems because of your disability.
Absolutely. And same goes with people with mental health issues. That's a huge problem with people dismissing people by saying they're crazy, unfortunately, which we all know that people who have mental illness are taken advantage of more because people know that they won't be taken serious. So,
well, and that even just speaks to like a very normal and typical trauma response to sexual violence can make someone seem incredible, right?
yes.
And that makes it that much more difficult for someone to disclose if they don't think they're going to be believed. You know, we talk a lot about victim blaming and things like that, and I think that comes into play too when there's some sort of misinterpretation of the information, or like I said, like the response that they're having is not what is expected, right? Even though it's extremely normal and valid.
Trauma does a lot to how your brain functions, right? Like chemically, it changes how you operate, and that immediately makes people dismiss you, unfortunately.
Even though physical and chemical psychological change that shifts in your brain when you experience trauma is so impactful on individuals in the way that they respond, not only in other crises and trauma incidences, but just in daily functioning.
Yeah. So I guess that kind of leads us to a really good point is, if someone were to face sexual violence or is in is felt like they're in a risky situation. Gabby, can you kind of speak to some safety planning or some intervention stuff that we can talk about?
I guess I want to preface this part of the conversation with saying your best option is to talk to somebody in the field to give you the most accurate help that you need, because every situation is so clearly different, right? Your violence is going to be very different from somebody else's violence. And so it would be best to, call a Cocoon or, a national hotline with somebody who is able to directly analyze your situation with you. But when it comes to sexual violence, it helps a lot to make sure that you're informing a trusted person to let you know where you're at, who you're with. Unfortunately, we have to go through these processes of, taking a picture of a license plate of the car that you're going, if it's a first date. And, if it is a first date, it would be best to get your own transportation to and from, until you are able to trust that person. But, we also know that a lot of times it is the people that we trust that are doing these things. But, there is CPOs if you want to get a legal restriction. And that's something that the Cocoon helps with a lot, is going to the court and helping you file the paperwork that you need. But there's, a lot of safety tools in your community that, advocates and community specialists would be able to directly assess with you in greater detail. So
yeah, definitely. And I'm glad that you bring that up too, because I think that although there are a lot of really wonderful agencies and a lot of wonderful support systems out there, having someone that's in your corner that's sensitive and knowledgeable specifically around sexual violence is really helpful in that journey too. Just finding that trusting support system seems to be a really beneficial tool for survivors, regardless of how they choose to move forward with their case and their incident. That seems to be a pretty solid foundational piece.
Yeah. Having somebody to be your team player instead of, the legal system, unfortunately. I shouldn't say unfortunately. They have to stay neutral though. So that doesn't mean that it's not unfortunate that they're neutral, but it is unfortunate that they're not meant to support you as a victim. And, same goes to your universities and Title IX programs, student conduct programs. They're meant to be neutral. So to have somebody there that is meant to represent you is very important, whether that be, a friend, an advisor, or an advocate, a family member, an attorney. There are victim rights attorneys that, a lot of them that will help for free. But, having someone there to represent your needs is extremely important, because the systems in place are not there to represent you or protect you, unfortunately. So,
yeah. Well, I guess that kind of is a good segue into our next thing is, what are we all doing since we are the sexual violence team? Yes. Which I think we should have said earlier, right? We are the sexual violence department here at the Cocoon. But, what are we doing out in the community to try to combat, SB and how can we support others that are trying to do things.
Yeah, I think that thankfully all three of us are here because it's like the trifecta of services, right? We've got like the prevention, early intervention, we've got the education and awareness to kind of try to break stigma and bring knowledge about the situation, and we've got direct service action with Gabby. So who wants to start?
Yeah, I mean,
we can nose goes it.
Yeah. Well, I guess we can start from best case scenario, right? So prevention, the idea is to educate the kiddos on, you know, what to notice and try to stop it from happening in the first place, right? So a lot of what I talk about is consent, and that is a big topic for a lot of my kids because so many of them, we just had a discussion the other day where they were like, it's ridiculous that you even have to teach us this. And I was like, okay, but like, you understand this, and I'm so grateful that you do, but so many kids that I teach don't, right? And so, yeah, I focus heavily on consent. We talk a lot about healthy relationships, so like what to look for and what green flags and red flags are in a relationship and how to know when it's turning sour, right? And then to go one step further, you know, we do talk about bystander intervention, you know, and I can kind of let you do that if you want. But you know, a lot of what I teach the kids is, you know, work together, you know, because I think a lot of times the kids that I talk to don't trust adults, and some of them have good reason not to, right? So making sure that they have plans in place for each other that hopefully involve adults at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we kind of touched base a little bit about bystander intervention in our first episode, so I don't think we need to go into super detail, but really just like you said, showing people the red flags and what that means and how to intervene safely for you and the other person who may be experiencing that violence. I also am really glad that you brought up the consent piece. I know we're going to talk about consent later on in the month with some of our episodes, but I think that it's really important not only to justify like what the kid was saying, right? Like, I can't believe you have to teach this to us. We're teaching it not only as a safety measure for individuals to have autonomy and feel empowered by themselves, but also to hopefully stop victimization from happening in the first place, which is always the end goal. And I think that you do a really great job of meeting people where they're at. And I think that unfortunately with the social deficits as a result of the pandemic, that this really just has created the perfect storm for there to be a lot of already pre-existing miscommunication and understanding about what consent and sexual violence is, to now where we're at. Well, I don't want to say the pandemic is over because it's far from over, but the crisis part is over, and now I think we're trying to get back into the swing of things, and we have an opportunity to really make a lot of social change with that. So I think that's really great, especially from the prevention side.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, does that kind of cover what we do? Is there more you want to say on the education and outreach piece?
I would just say, at least on my end, I think that you do a great job of doing this too. It's just breaking that stigma. The pre-existing misunderstandings and misconceptions is a generational issue, and honestly is something that I think we're still combating every day in what we do with this line of work. Just really trying to bring facts into the conversation, but in an enduring way, you know, that creates conversations that can hopefully shift that cultural perspective. But I don't think there's anything else that like we do in prevention and education realms that you didn't already cover.
I think what's really important about what you do is you get the word out about what Gabby does.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
I do try at least.
Because I do think that is a barrier. You know, if our efforts haven't been impactful, at the very least, we can share the resources that we can provide here at the Cocoon. And a huge resource that we have is Gabby.
Absolutely.
So do you want to talk a little bit about like what you do to support survivors?
Yes.
Everything.
So I guess it's so hard to like just give one statement because there's a lot of things that I do depending on who I'm helping and what they need. But, you know, there is legal advocacy. So, you know, going to the courthouse and filing for a protection order, or, you know, going to criminal hearings. A lot of what I do is go to hearings that survivors themselves cannot go to. Working with attorneys, helping get legal representation, especially if possible, like at no cost to the survivor, because like the last thing that you should have to do is pay money for being victimized, right? So there's that side. When it comes to students, I definitely help a lot with Title IX and student conduct, there for emotional support, and being able to take advantage of all of those programs at BGSU. BGSU is where I mainly work, but like at your university, because those, you're paying money for that, so you should be able to use it as much as you can to the best as your advantage. But so there's that side of things, and then like a lot of what I do is emotional support, because nobody wants to have to talk to their friends and family about what they've gone through over and over again, right? Especially if that person might be a friend or family member. You shouldn't have to tell somebody if you aren't comfortable with that, because it might change your relationship, and like that's not fair. Hopefully it doesn't, but we obviously know that
does.
Not a lot of there are a lot of people out there that are not supportive to their friends and family after these kinds of things happen, unfortunately. I will also say that I do run on the support group currently.
Yay!
Yeah. Hopefully there will be more in the future that cover more bases, because sexual violence, as we talked about, is such a broad thing. So like having one group for everyone doesn't seem very fitting, depending on how you've been victimized and where you're at in your life, in your healing journey. So there's that. I guess that's probably most of it.
I know something that you don't do often, but something that Cocoon does is if we get a hotline call where someone has been assaulted, we'll go to the hospital with them.
Absolutely.
I think that's something that not everybody knows about, because they think they have to pay for it or whatever. And so that is a huge service that we're able to provide. Our on-call advocates are able to provide is if someone needs to go to the hospital, we can support them through that and the process of getting the kit done and everything. So I think that pretty much covers everything we can provide here at the Cocoon for sexual violence and things of that nature. So Justina, what are we doing this month for Sexual Assault Awareness?
Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Obviously, 30 days of April is all month long is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. I didn't know this until this week, that this is the 22nd anniversary of Sexual Assault Awareness Month and April being nationally recognized. It is wild. Not to like out myself, but like I'm older than how long Sexual Assault Awareness Month has been recognized.
Yeah.
What? So I mean, throughout the month, really, it is just about bringing awareness and knowledge about sexual assault, what that is, statistics, and trying to create a safe space for conversations for those who want to learn more, as well as creating a foundational space for survivors to feel supported and to be able to amplify their voices throughout the entire month. And then I also don't know why exactly the color teal is Sexual Assault Awareness Month colors. I love it. I'm mad about it. I'm not really sure what the history behind that is. So
I'm not mad.
I know. If someone out there knows, let me know. But throughout the month, we have a lot of programming going on, not only in Wood County or Bowling Green, but just across the region of Northwest Ohio.
Absolutely. And I think the last thing we can mention is that if there is someone that needs Gabby services or in general the Cocoon services, calling the hotline is the best way to get a hold of one of us. And that really just streamlines the process, right? And that is a 24 hours, 7 days a week, every day, including holidays, someone will answer the phone. So.
Absolutely. I will say also, like, if you do go to your university or if you tell a professor, they are mandated reporters, so they will report that to Title IX and student conduct. They usually will give you my information if you go there. So that is another way to get in contact with me.
And I would say typically, too, if you go to the hospital or the police first, they will also still refer you back to us. So most times, all roads still lead to the Cocoon. So
Yes.
as long as you're reaching out to somebody,
Right.
we can still support you.
Yes.
And even if you're not local to Wood County or a resident, I think it's really important to even know where these resources are, because you can figure that out in your own hometown, right?
Yep.
So even though you may not go to BGSU or to Owens, and you go to a school in Cleveland or Columbus or something, right? There's a Title IX office there that can still provide you support. There are a number of agencies across the whole state. So keep that in mind too, as you guys are going through whatever process you're going through.
And that being said, like a statewide directory that could be helpful is the Ohio Alliance to End Sexual Violence. I never get that one right either.
All the acronyms.
It's rough. But OAESV also has a directory, so you can go to their website. They also have really great resources. But if you're not sure if there are resources in your county, you can always go to OAESV's website. And they can help you out from there.
I think something to stress too is like these are in place for a reason.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people call and they're hesitant because they don't think that what happened to them is bad enough for them to need these services, or something to that extent. And like, if you're calling, first of all, it's immediately like it's better to call us and see what we can do. And then if you decide that you do not want them afterwards, but like, or that's fine. But like, they're here for a reason, and we're at no cost to anybody. Nothing the Cocoon does costs any money to survivors, and might as well take advantage of these resources that are here for you. So,
well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but another thing that I was thinking of was that when you call us, there is no obligation to pursue legal, right? So I think a lot of people are scared of that too, especially if it's a close family member or friend, right? They're worried that if they reach out, that they'll be pressured into pursuing something further. Right. And that's just not true. So we're really here to support survivors first and foremost. And because we use an empowerment model, it's what they need and what they want, and not what we think is best for them. So I think that's really important to stress as well.
We are like confidential. And like I'm 100% confidential unless you tell me specifically that you're going to harm yourself or somebody else. There's like everything that you say to me stays
right, or if they've given you permission to reach out.
Also, very true. If you give me permission, that's different. But like you don't have to worry. I think a lot of times people are worried that I will go to university or the police or anything, and I'm not going to do that because you know what's best for you and your situation.
Well, and it's actually against our policies anyway.
Yes.
So Gabby would get in a lot of trouble, and we don't want that.
Absolutely not.
So
yeah, I do think that kind of a little bit on an off-topic note that we probably should at least maybe touch base a little bit about. April can be really overwhelming for people, and just talking a little bit about like what self-care could look like in community care, and any tips or tricks that you might have, and what you're going to do to take care of yourselves this month.
I'm crocheting for the yarn storming.
Yes!
We were literally at lunch today, and I was just crocheting my hands off. Yeah, definitely doing a hobby that you love. Today's gorgeous, so like go outside. Yeah, definitely hobbies are my jam. Music in general typically makes me feel good. Gabby, what are you doing?
A big part for me is just relying on my support system. So, I do have my pets, I think, are probably the biggest support system. My partner, my friends, and my family are like, I think that's a huge thing, is relying on people that you can trust and will support you. But, I say we, it's me. My several personalities. Depending on which mood I'm in, I am trying to garden this year. We'll see how that goes. A couple sewing projects,
I need to figure this out because everyone's sewing and crocheting.
Because the internet gives me anxiety.
Yeah, we'll teach you.
I have to figure it out. It's fine.
Yeah, Animal Crossing.
Oh yeah,
big on Animal Crossing.
So good.
There's no crime in Animal Crossing.
No.
Perfect utopia.
Okay, Justina, what are you doing?
Oh, that question applies to me. Great question. I'm really trying to focus on rest this season, and just really prioritizing grounding and things like that. I am also a student, so it's a little crazy right now. I don't really know. Probably gonna try to dedicate some more time into hobbies. Like I love to bake, and things like that.
A suggestion I would offer to those listening in to Justina is that if you feel like you don't have the time to do more, right? Because I think we, especially being students, struggle to find the time to do more, to garden and to sew. Trying to find some gratitude for the things you can do, right? So like sometimes I'll just take a shower and be like, oh my gosh, I love this shower, right? Or like getting a coffee and just being like, oh my gosh, this coffee is freaking amazing, right?
And I do have some like really cool like projects coming up. Like we're making a homemade bar and a couple other cool things for our apartment and stuff. So like I just am excited for that. I just got to get ready for those things too. What were you gonna say?
I'm gonna say that it's important to like recognize that like self-care doesn't actually have to be something that you put a lot of effort in, right? Like, you can just like sit on the couch and watch TV. Like that is self-care.
Yeah.
Well, and sometimes eating a lot of food. Yes. Or your favorite food.
Yep. Well, and sometimes the way that I have to remind myself is as long as I'm doing it intentionally to care for myself, it is self-care, right? So if I am choosing to sit on the couch and watch TV because that's what I need right now, that is self-care.
Yeah.
If I am losing myself in a TV show and I'm neglecting my needs, that's not self-care.
Right. I think it's really easy to get caught up, especially with all of us being so busy and everything else, that like just resting and allowing yourself to rest without guilt is really, really important too.
Yeah. I think the phrase I used the other day for crocheting was intentionally harmless dissociation. Where I could just focus my entire brain on this yarn going around a hook. That is why I do it.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've covered everything
and
so. Then some.
Yeah.
I think this has been the most comprehensive episode. So thank you, Gabby, for joining us.
Yes.
We loved having you. We gotta sip it out.
Yes, we
Oh.
do. We gotta do
one more time.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Oh, I couldn't slurp. I had a fruit.